So I'll be serving as a analyst and possibly a color commentator at the Northern Arena Montreal LAN event, which will take place between November 10th and 13th. And I already released a vlog where I kind of delivered just a personal message and gave some tournament information about the event, which you can check out in the description below. There will be a link. I also did a Group A preview video that you may have seen. If not, I'll also put that in the description below so you can check out where I talked about those teams over in Group A. And so now I'm going to talk about the teams in Group B. And basically the format I'm going to follow for each team. So I'm going to talk a little bit about their recent results, talk a little bit about the recent form of some of their players, get into their map pool a bit, and then maybe give some brief notes on just their style and things like that, and kind of how I expect them to perform at this event. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, though the Group A preview video did go pretty long, but I think I averaged talking about each team for about maybe 10 minutes or something like that. So I guess it's not too bad talking about 4 teams in one video. So that's what I'm going to aim for here as well. Try to keep it brief, but still informative if you want to kind of get up to speed on some of these teams that are going to be competing in this event. That's really the whole goal of this video. So we'll start out with Team Envious. And so this is a team that's gone through a recent roster change, obviously. They were playing with Devil for quite some time, and then they replaced him with Sixer just recently, who did actually stand in for them for NBK, I believe, at the Star Ladder Season 2 finals in September. But then he came in as a permanent member to replace Devil after they came back from the Gfinity Invitational, I believe. So he's played with them at WESG finals for Europe and CIS that took place, as well as at the EPL Season 4 finals, and he's played with them, you know, online throughout the last couple of months as well. Just to look at kind of what this team was doing, they were playing pretty decent, like I guess like towards the middle of this year. Like they had a pretty good result at DreamHack Malmö in April. They took a top 4 finish and they qualified for Cologne. But then they also made it to the playoffs of E-League. They actually won their group against Virtus Pro. So they were doing some okay stuff during the summer. But then once they got to Cologne in July, of course, they fell out in groups, which is disappointing, losing to Liquid, who went on to play second, and as well as to Mouse Sports. Then they had to use a stand-in for MBK at Starladder I-League, but they took a 5th, 8th there. They did actually have a win over Vici Gaming and a close loss to VP. I think they actually beat VP on call. They had close loss to G2 on Dust 2 and call, get eliminated from that event. And then they went on to DreamHack Bucharest in September with their 5 that included Devil. And they placed top 4 at this event as well, beating a Heroic and Gambit in best of 3s, and then losing to C9, who would go on to the finals of this event. And of course, C9 just recently won EPL Season 4 in this historic moment for NACS. And then after that, they went to the GFIN Invitational, which they actually won. They won best of 5s against Epsilon and Mouse Sports to take the title there. That was only like a 4-team event, which I was actually at. Really cool. They then went on to WESG, where they placed 5th through 8th after losing to Virtus Pro. Very respectable, as VP's, you know, the best team in the world right now by many accounts. I mean, I didn't really have any notable map wins, I guess, when they beat Alternate Attacks and Astralis in group play, but that's really about it. And then at the EPL finals, they did, in fact, make it out of groups after beating Immortals and Liquid and OpTic, all in very one-sided fashions, but losing to Mouse Sports, and they went to face NIP in the quarterfinals, where they lost in an 0-2 series. That was decently competitive. They lost in overtime on Dust 2 in one of the maps they played there. So this is a team that seems to be, you know, fitting in like a top 4 finish here and there lately. You know, they had a couple of like 5th, 6th, 5th through 8th, but they haven't had any crazy big results. I mean, they won a title Gfinity Invitational, but to be fair, the field at that event was a lot weaker than most other events, and they only had to play 2 games to take the title because it was only 4 teams. Bucharest, I mean, again, they didn't really beat anyone super notable. I mean, Heroic was kind of a team that has been on the rise in the Danish scene. Obviously, now that they just went through a roster change, it's kind of changed. But yeah, it's definitely a team that's really struggled, except for maybe the middle part of this year. They had some pretty notable top 4 finishes. Like the DreamHack Mountain result was actually pretty legit. Like they beat like Tempo Storm. Now Immortals, who was actually looking pretty hot at that, or was starting to rise up a little bit at that time, and they beat Dignitas. Which was a team that was, you know, pretty decent at that time as well. So yeah, it's been a while since we've seen like really big results from them, but legit that they won Gfinity Invitational, I suppose. And the fact that they lost to NIP in EPL Season 4 is a respectable loss. So respectable losses like VP and NIP in the last couple of lands they've been to. as far as the recent form of their players, Kenny S has been exceptional. Like, he's really getting back to this incredible level where you could argue that he's the best opera in the world. If you don't think he's the best opera in the world, he certainly is at least like right near Fallen or something like that. If you want to say Fallen's the best opera in the world or something like that, just a carry level player. I mean, he's looking like vintage Kenny S. And he was like carrying Titan or something like that. Just in incredible form. He's going to be really key in this event. He'll probably be the best player at this event, to be honest, unless like Shocks really shows up, which is certainly possible. But outside of that, I really feel like he could be like one of the strongest players at this entire event. And so he's definitely going to be one of the key pieces of this team, like really the driving force of their success. Apex is certainly a guy who can have amazing impact. Like he had this MVP performance at Gfinity Invitational where he just put ridiculous numbers out there. He also did pretty well at DreamHack Bucharest. In September. He had a pretty good event there as well. Didn't look as good at EPL Season 4 finals, if we're being honest, but still okay. So he's going to be the other key piece, right? Like the Kenny S Apex duo is going to be what this team will rely on to get results. And it's because they play a very like simple style of Counter-Strike, very 1-4 heavy, aggression. And Apex and Kenny S are a big part of opening things up on the map, and so these are going to be the two key pieces for the team. MBK to me is like a solid third. He didn't play particularly good at EPL, but he was okay, I thought. And he played okay at DreamHack Bucharest as well. He had like that one really big best of 3 against Heroic, and was good versus Gambit at that event back in September. So I think he's like a pretty solid third for this team. Like if you have Kenny S and Apex being like your top 2 and MBK being your third, like that's the ideal scenario for this team. Happy's going to get his numbers and he's going to in-game lead the team, but again, it's not like he's calling anything crazy, and he's usually going to just be like off by himself, not really having a substantial impact, to be quite honest. In fact, he gets criticized heavily for perhaps baiting too much, being too much of a lurker, going too heavy-handed in that direction. So, to be quite honest, I don't really rely on him to do much for the team as far as getting things done on their terrorist sides. I will say that Mirage is maybe the one exception for this. I actually do see him engaging A early on from like Palace or A ramp and trying to help open up things there. That seems to be the one exception, but everything else, it seems like he's just kind of out there on his own. And then to me, Sixer, it's really not that much of an upgrade from Devil in my opinion. Like they're just like the other peripheral role player, like more supportive. You're not really going to get much from him. He's not been bad. He actually did okay at EPL Season 4. So yeah, I mean, that's just kind of where they're sitting. They're just a very top-heavy team in the sense that they really rely on their 2 stars, Apex and Kenny S, to get work done. And that's the best way I can put it. As far as their map pool goes, their cash has been quite good. They're 8-2 the last 10 times they've played it. And they're 9-5 with and when I'm doing this, I'm counting the previous lineup as well with Devil as in the current one is how I'm figuring this. And they've had some quality wins on cash. I mean, they beat VP a couple of times in E-League. They beat FaZe at DreamHack Malmö. I mean, they've had some quality wins. They've had some stat padding involved, but yeah, their cash has been quite good. Their Cobble is really good as well. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games played. So very strong on Cobblestone as well. This is probably one of their best maps. They really play the T side of this map quite well. It really favors their style, particularly just the way Apex kind of controls drop room and the way that he can be utilized to control the map on the A side as well. Kenny S's op can be a big factor. So this is just a really good map for them alongside Cash. Like they're really solid in these 2 maps. Is the best way I can put it. Like that's going to be the 2 that they rely on the most. Dust 2 is also going to be quite good. They're 7-3 in their last 10 plays offline. Again, not like against any crazy teams that they've won to, and they've even dropped it to like C9. But they usually don't drop it to like really big teams. So their Dust 2 is also going to be quite up there. Now, once you get past those maps, like those are the big 3 for them: Cash, Cobble, Dust 2. Once you move past that, their nuke, they've shown some sign on it. They beat Epsilon at Gfinity, but they've also had some losses, so they're not that strong on it, I don't think. But I guess it's to a point where it doesn't have to be a permanent ban from them, because that's Overpass is pretty much their permanent ban. Then Train, they don't play it that much. They're 2-2 recently. They did have a win over Virtus Pro in E-League, which was pretty big, but they lost it twice to Mouse and Liquid in Cologne. There's their 2 losses. And then Mirage, they looked good against Cloud9 in Bucharest. and they had this crazy 6 overtime loss to Heroic at that same event, and they lost in overtime to Virtus Pro at E-League. So their losses are 2 of those 4 losses are like in overtime, like really crazy competitive games. So their Mirage is actually like a little bit better than maybe what the numbers say. So yeah, they have the 3 big maps, and then they are competitive on Mirage, and they can play some train. So their map pool is actually pretty decent. Again, it's really just going to come down though to how their individual players perform. And that's about all I want to say on this. I'm not going to get too much into tactics. I mean, really, again, very 1-4 heavy, very aggressive executes. On Cash, I would say they have a pretty well-functioning default in comparison to maybe some of the other maps in their pool, but Cobble's certainly a map they rely on aggression. Mirage, they can certainly play the mid control default, but they do it very fast paced. Like, they don't sit back mid very often. They really try to get up mid quickly, really try to get connector and catwalk, and just try to rapidly attack something. So yeah, just known for their aggression and known for being very top heavy as far as relying on their stars. And I'll just leave it at that for Envious. Now for OpTic, I don't want to spend a crazy amount of time talking about OpTic. I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm just going to link another video in the timestamp below for OpTic, because I just did a really in detail video about OpTic. It was called OpTic in Focus, which I released just the week before I'm releasing this video, or a couple weeks before I released this video. And I really kind of went just like in depth about OpTic and how I felt about them, their strengths, their weaknesses, their recent results. So I hate to redirect you to another video, but if you really want to learn about how I feel about OpTic, that's definitely the video to check out. So I'm not going to harp on this too long. I will just say that they kind of just got this current 5 together not too long ago. They've been to 2 offline events since putting this lineup together, where they went to EPL Season 4 finals, where they got out of groups, and they lost to C9, the eventual champions, in the quarterfinals, I believe. And they beat Liquid and Immortals very one-sided fashion, but they lost to Mouse and Envy, and then, like I said, they lost to C9, who were the eventual champions of the event. At New York, they fell out in groups, but not before getting some impressive map results against Astralis and G2. They knocked both those teams out of the tournament. Their online play since putting this 5 together has been quite good. I mean, they beat out Cloud9 and Immortals to qualify for ESO1 New York. In the iBuyPower Fall Tournament, they took second to Immortals after beating SK and TSM. So really big results there to take second. And then, of course, they qualified for E-League Season 2 by beating Complexity and Renegades. Their record on EPL Season 4 was really good since putting this lineup together. They went, let's see here, 12-4 since putting this 5 together in EPL. So really good online results. They were beating a lot of the lower ranked teams in NAB, to be fair. They took maps off of like Immortals and NRG with this 5. And ECS, they were looking decent. They beat TSM, they beat LG, they took maps off of Liquid and Immortals. So, pretty solid online results since this 5 came together. As far as their players go, Mixwell seems to be a guy you can really rely on, very versatile. Used in rifle roles a lot nowadays instead of opping, though his op is very strong, and that probably should be what he's doing. Like, that's actually the biggest thing that triggers me about this team, is the fact that I feel like they should be forcing Mixwell to op more. I don't know if it's because he doesn't want to do it or because others want to. I'm not sure what the case is, but he needs to have the op in his hands more, particularly on the T side. Just really strong. Say Rush, fairly solid entry fragger. He's like the other big guy for me on this team that I think they can rely on to help them open things up. Tarek, obviously very mechanically gifted, had some good moments with CLG around the Columbus time period. He had a pretty good ESO1 New York event for OpTic as well, and he's been pretty solid online lately, but he's known to be sometimes a streaky player, so that's something I have to keep an eye on. Stanislaw, new in-game leader, can also be a hit-or-miss type player, but I think he puts up respectable numbers for his role as an in-game leader. I think he's looked pretty solid online. He looked okay at ESO1 New York and EPL Season 4. So, he's kind of in a new role leading the team, but he's done a little bit of in-game leading in the past. So, I think that this is looking okay. I know they're looking for a coach, which should help Stanislaw out. I don't know if they'll have one anytime soon, but I know that they're certainly pursuing that. And then Naf is the final player on the team. Again, very hit-or-miss player, very high skill ceiling. Looked really good at ESO1 New York, but not as good at EPL. So again, just kind of being that streaky type of player, similar to Stanislaw and Tarek as far as how well they can perform. Map pool-wise, most of it's online, so very hard to read. But I will say that like online, they've been really solid on Cash, Cobble. Their Dust 2's actually become very strong, which used to be like a ban for them when Daps was on the team and before Tarek came on board. So they've definitely improved their Dust 2. Their Cobble and Cash are pretty good. Their Mirage has been okay online, but they don't play it much. It seems they don't play it at all offline. Same with Nuke. That's like they had never played Nuke or Mirage offline yet with their current lineups. And then their Overpass has been quite good online and decent on LAN. They beat Astralis at New York. Their Train has been exceptional online. And on LAN, they did beat Liquid in EPL in a very one-sided fashion. But they did have some losses to SK and Fnatic in New York. But to be fair, SK is like a god on Train. So you can kind of forgive them for that one. So they seem to be having a decent map pool. But most of the sample size comes from online play. So very hard to gauge, to be fair. Tactically, it seems like they run a lot of the same defaults that Daps had in place. So they definitely are a team that really mixes up the default style, the slower, more methodical approach. Except the big thing is trying to figure out who's going to do what. Like Naf is pretty solidified as a lurker. Stanislaw is becoming more active since he's in-game leading now rather than just playing peripheral roles. But it's really map dependent on who's doing what, it feels like. Like sometimes I'll see Mixwell play solo like Stairs on Overpass. Then other times you'll see him very involved in getting control like on, Cash or on Mirage when they do play it. Definitely a little bit more of an active role. And again, sometimes he's opping, sometimes he's not. That's like really big. The biggest thing is the musical chair opping thing. And then other than that, like Rush, obviously dedicated entry fragger, he's going to be in the main entry roles throughout of it. I would say, like I said, they seem to have pretty solid functional defaults. They also throw in a lot of like nip-based tactics, particularly on Cash and Cobblestones, where I notice it most. You'll see them run some of the nip executes on those maps. So they seem to have a pretty deep playbook. They seem to be able to shift gears pretty well between being like default and running executes and being a little bit faster paced and tricky. The biggest thing for them has been closing rounds, and they can open up rounds well and even get in advantageous situations, but it seems like they struggle to finish the job. And I noticed this mostly when I watched them play Cloud9 on Cobble at EPL. They lost that map 2-16, so they got smashed, but there were so many rounds where they had a man advantage and they had done well to open things up in the early round, but fell apart in the mid round and late round stages of these different scenarios. And so, yeah, like the closing factor is big. You also take into account that all their wins on offline have been where they started off really big. Like they had like a big double-digit first half, whereas all their losses, except for the VP loss at New York, which is very close on Cobble, very competitive. It was like 8-7 halves in that game, I think. All the other losses, it seems like they just struggled to play from behind and get back into a game when things got tough, and there's been talk about whether they have issues with tilting and all this good stuff. Again, if you want a deep explanation about OpTic, please check out that OpTic in Focus video I did, which you can find on my YouTube. It'll be in the description below as well, and then I will leave it at that for OpTic. So far, I've talked about Envy and OpTic. These are the two teams I expect to come out of this group and make it to playoffs. And in my Group A preview, I mentioned I expect it to be G2 and Liquid who make it out of that group. So I basically built my playoffs with G2, Liquid, Envy, OpTic. In the Group A preview, I was a little bit iffy who would come out first, G2 or Liquid. And I put Heroic as like a potential upset team. In this group, I'm pretty confident Envy will come out first and OpTic will come out second. I'm a little bit more sure of that one than I was of Group A, where I was a little bit more confused about how it would actually go down. So that's that. So now we come up to NRG. Now this is a team that online has been capable of doing well. They came 6th in the regular season of EPL Season 4. They went 17-9. They got 2-0s against Liquid. They took maps off of OpTic. They beat all of like the mid-tier and lower-tier teams with little trouble. I mean, they did drop a map to CLG, but other than that, they took care of business. I mean, they obviously struggled against SK, Immortals, and C9, like the big 3 other teams in the North American scene, but otherwise they really solidified themselves as being a really good mid-tier team in the NA scene, and because of that, because it got extended to 6 teams for the playoffs, they made it there. ECS Season 2, a bit of the same. thing going on. They've taken mats off of Liquid and TSM, but they did drop a mat to Cole, which is a little bit disappointing. And then outside of that, that's about it for online play talk. Offline play wise, I would say you haven't seen them play too many offline events. The first one was E-League, which was when they first got tabs in way back in June, so that's quite some time ago, where they only were able to win one map off of CLG, lost all the maps to the old SK and Astralis. And then they played at Northern Arena Toronto, which was pretty recent, September, where they actually had a really disappointing finish. They lost to CLG in the group decider, which was like a brand new team at that event, new roles for everyone, 2 new players. It was definitely a really disappointing result for them to drop that series against CLG and go out in the group stage. And then EPL Season 4 Finals, their most recent event here this month, they didn't win a single map in the group stage. They were very competitive in a couple of maps, but they got smashed by Cedon and Dignitas, but they were competitive in the other maps against NiP, FaZe, and SK. In fact, NiP went all 30 rounds, and they lost to FaZe in double overtime. This is actually a common thread about this team, is that in a lot of their LAN results where they play against big teams, they are extremely close, but they never quite get the job done. Like I said, against FaZe and NiP at EPL, this is classic case. At E-League, there was so many maps against Astralis where they were competitive, like 16-13, 16-14, 19-16 games. Like they always looked like they were on the verge of getting an upset, but they never quite get it done, is really the best way that I can put it. And so their offline record, because of this, is quite terrible. They've played, I think, 18 maps on LAN so far with the current 5, and they have only won 3 of those 18 maps, so that means they've lost 15. Now, of those 15 maps that they have lost, I would say 2, 3, 4, 5. I would say 6 of those 15 maps were against top, like, elite level teams, or just below elite level, certainly top 10 level teams. And they were like on the verge of beating them but couldn't quite do it. So that certainly seems to be like something like that's food for thought for this team. So their offline play has been competitive at times and make you feel like they have a chance, but it's never quite there. And so that's something to really think about. And the fact that they lost to CLG in Northern Arena Toronto is pretty crazy. And not winning a single map at EPL. Granted, they were up against a bunch of top teams. You know, they were playing against NiP, Dignitas, teams that have won titles recently, Cloud9, who eventually won the title at this event. So it's not like they lost slouches and they were competitive, but yeah, it's just like they don't take that next step. As far as map pool goes, online, they've been really good on Dust 2, and they've been about even on Cash and Cobble and Mirage. Whereas they don't really play Nuke, and they don't really play too much Train anymore, though it used to be a map they used to favor a lot. But they haven't really been successful on Nuke, Overpass, or Train, but they've been very good on Dust 2 and pretty solid on Cash, Cobble, and Mirage. Offline, again, there's not much good to talk about. The only maps they've won offline is once on Dust 2, once on Mirage, and once on Overpass. And they've only played Overpass and Dust 2 twice, so they're 50-50 on those maps, I guess. But their wins on those 2 maps, by the way, were against CLG. So they don't. The only big map win they have offline is, well, I guess none. Like, all their map wins offline have been against CLG at different times, even though ultimately they lost to them in a best of 3, but they won 2 maps against them. So that's maybe the troubling thing, I suppose you would say. Yeah, because they won a map against CLG E-League on Dust 2, which was a long time ago. Then they won Mirage once in group play, and then Overpass once in a best of 2 decider. So yeah, very limited on the offline results. Players-wise, Tapson seems to be the guy that I count on the most on this team. He had a really good E-League performance for NRG. He was by far their best player at that LAN event. He also did okay at Northern Arena Toronto, but he was pretty poor at EPL Season 4, if I'm honest. Peter is the other big guy on this team, is an opera that can have a huge impact, but can also be somewhat streaky. to be fair. I thought he played really good at Northern Arena Toronto. He was okay at EPL, but there's been some other events where he's been kind of 50-50. So he seems to be an opera that when he's on point can certainly have a substantial impact, and they rely on him a lot since they play like a slower, more methodical style of play. They rely on their default a bit more than, say, an OpTic who can mix it up pretty evenly that I talked about earlier in this video. So those are the two key players for me, are Peter and Tabson. For me, Fugly, really flaky. Like, he can have some events where he's pretty decent. He can have some mats where he's pretty good, but to me, he's like really hit or miss. I don't know that he's had like a positive KD ratio at Atlanta in quite some time. I think it's been like quite a while since he's gone positive over an entire event. And so that's a little bit concerning because while numbers aren't everything, you have to be able to at least, go positive to some degree, right? And so that seems to be like a concerning thing for me with Fugly because he seems like he has some good mechanical skill, but yeah, that's like I said, a big issue. Legia, the exact same boat. Hasn't gone positive a single LAN event with NRG since he's been on the team. Also a very 50-50 iffy player, can have a good map here or there, but usually not that good. And so these are two liabilities for this team, is Fugly and Legia, particularly given the fact that Gob B is not really known for fragging, right? He's a very good in-game leader. He's very well respected for being a good tactician and being able to lead a team, but he's not known to put out numbers. So when you have 3 of your 5 players being either not known for fragging or very streaky, very 50-50, haven't gone positive across an entire LAN event in a very long time, that's the problem. Like, I hate to be the bad guy here, but yeah, this is not good. It seems like Peter and Tabson are just having to lug weight around a lot of the time. Like, I think Gob B serves his role as an in-game leader. You got Peter, you got Tabson, you got 2 liabilities on this team, in my opinion. And so that can really hurt them performance-wise. Like I said, they're a team that certainly relies on just being very default-oriented, being able to just work from that and do mid-round calls. But they can also throw in some cool executes. But again, like I said, very like just disciplined default seems to be their tried and true style. They do have some cool stuff like their triple Ivy play on Train or just some heavy outer executes on Train. So there's definitely some ways they can change the pace, but again, very reliant on just Gobby's mid-round reads. But yeah, they just seem to lack firepower, and they seem to lack, to some degree, this mental fortitude to close games against top opponents, even if they're in striking distance, and they could even have a lead towards the end of the game. Like against Nip on Cash EPL Season 4, for example, is like the most recent one that comes to my mind. But they just don't quite finish. So those are some of the main issues for this team. I expect them to maybe be competitive at this event in their group, but I don't see them getting out of it. I think they would be like 3rd in the group, basically. And so that means that I come down to CLG to finish off the Group B preview. Now, this team has only played offline once with this team, which was Northern Arena Toronto, where they did beat out NRG in the group stage of that, which was a good result for them for their debut with their current 5. They lost to C9 in the quarterfinals, which was fair enough. C9 actually takes 2nd place at this event, and they're really building something with this 5. So their Northern Arena Toronto event actually wasn't too shabby, like their first offline LAN. I'll give you credit for that, CLG. But their online play has been, lackluster, if we're honest. At the EPL Season 4 event, this team went 10-16. They weren't able to really get any 2-0s against any of the top teams. They did take a map off of Liquid and Renegades, were a couple of good map wins that they got out of the season, but overall not good. ECS Season 2, they did take a map off of SKL Mirage, and they took a map off of Liquid on Train, and they 2-0'd Luminosity, which is good. So ECS has been a little bit better for them, but still nothing that knocks your socks off, right? I will say that this team seems to tactically have really kind of been stripped away from what they used to do with Pete as their coach when he was kind of calling from the coach position. They had this really rigid default methodical style that worked really well that they could build from. Now this team seems to be more reliant on heavy executes, at least initially. I have seen them on some maps, particularly Mirage and Cobblestone, and maybe to some degree Train, where you've seen them develop some more functioning defaults and more really solidified roles. but I've also heard rumors that they're maybe looking to make a roster change. So I don't really know how to feel about like where they're at strategically, because I've seen progress. Like I said, getting functioning defaults, getting people in more comfortable positions, except for opping. That seems to be the one thing where, like OpTic, they seem to be trying to figure out what they want to do with this, because it was Cutler who was opping instead of Kusta once they got Sub Rosa and Ethan on board. Then we saw Kusta do a bit more opping on the Terra side recently, though. Usually it seems like Cutler still opts on the CT side, but Kusta opts more on the T side. And we've seen him online in a couple of games like have a really big impact with the op on Terra sides. So I don't know where this is headed, to be honest, when it comes to their opping. That's kind of the thing that I'm still keeping my eyes on. You know, yeah, that's really the best way I can put it. Online wise, like I said, I can't really know what their map pool is, to be fair. Like their Dust 2 has been pretty even. They're 4-4 on it, I think, in the last 3 months. Mirage, they're 4-5, so they played a lot, but a losing record. And then their Cobble, they're 1-7, and their Overpass, they're 1-6. So the two maps that they play the most outside of Mirage, they have like really poor like win rates on. Whereas when I watch them play it, though, I can see that they have like a decent system in place. They're just not getting results on them. And so it's really like Dust 2 and Mirage are their key maps to keep an eye on, I guess. Whereas I don't really see them play Nuke or Cache that much. It seems to be two maps they try to avoid. So I don't expect them to do too much at this event, to be honest. Like, it would be a really good result for them if they could. So yeah, like I just don't see too much to be excited about from this team. I have noticed some signs of improvement, particularly in some of their most recent ECS play, but still nothing to write home about is really the best way I could put it. Like they got a big win against SK and Liquid and ECS. I've seen them develop strategically, but I still feel like they're trying to figure out the opping thing, and I think that they just still need better performances out of their players on a more consistent basis is the other big thing. Because right now, I don't know that I could point to a player on that team and be confident that I can rely on them to perform every single game or almost every single game. You have a bunch of players who at times can be quite good. Like Kusta at times has been like really good. And then some of the other players on the team will at times have good performances, but it's just nothing consistent yet. So I don't know if that will eventually turn into something or if they're always going to be streaky and they're in trouble. And that's really the best way I can put it. So that's going to be my preview for Group B. Again, I expect to see Envy and OpTic come out 1 and 2 of the group, and NRG to be third and CLG to be last. But we have seen CLG beat NRG on LAN at Toronto, so it's certainly possible that CLG would come out third instead of NRG. That's definitely in the cards. But I still don't see either NRG or CLG making it out of the group, in my opinion. So, yep, that's it. Again, I'll have links in the description below if you want to check out my Group A preview and my other vlog of just like personal stuff and tournament information. And yeah, just follow, subscribe for more content. Thanks so much.